How do you monitor HashiCorp Vault? In this video, we're going to learn how to do that using Prometheus, Grafana, and Loki. My name is Sam Gabriel, and let's get started. Alright, so our agenda for this video, we're going to talk about metrics and telemetry for Vault. We're also going to talk about logs, system logs, and audit logs. And I'll show you how that all works with an animated diagram. Then we're gonna run a demo and I'll show you how this all works in the real world. And then also we're gonna go over the configuration, how everything works. Now this is a subset of a larger course that I have for Vault, and it's called Vault for Operators, or Vault 202, Vault for Operators. So if you're interested in learning how to run Vault in a production setting with all the best practices, then take a look at this course. I'll leave a link to it in the description of this video. All right, so let's get started and talk a little bit about what to monitor when you're monitoring Vault. And namely, we're going to look at the metrics and also the logs. So you'd have Vault running typically in a VM or a number of VMs if you have a cluster. You could, of course, have it running in Kubernetes as well. But then we would expose if we're using Prometheus, that is, we're going to expose this v1 sys metrics endpoint. And Prometheus is a tool that will go out and scrape the metrics that you've exposed. So in this case, Prometheus is going to scrape the metrics at this endpoint that I mentioned. It's kind of a pull method. And in addition to the Vault telemetry metrics, there's also a node exporter, which is a tool to expose metrics on the VM, on the Linux node itself. So you would expect metrics such as CPU, memory, disk utilization, and so on. And those are very important as well to be able to monitor. The next piece is looking at logs, and there's an agent called Prometheus that you deploy in the VM, and it will basically look at specific file logs and ship those logs over to a log aggregator. In this case, Loki is what we're using, and Loki is a product by Grafana Labs. And in this case, it's a push method. So the Prometheus agent is going to push those logs to Loki. And those logs are primarily two sets of logs. There's the system or operational logs, and then there are the audit logs from Vault. So we'll have each one of those in their separate files, and those logs will get pushed over to Loki. And the final piece of the puzzle is the presentation layer, or the front end. And we use Grafana for that. So we'll have two data sources. In this case, Prometheus is one and Loki is the other one. And everything will get sent over to Grafana, or Grafana again is the front end where you'll see all those metrics and logs in one place. So that's pretty much it from a high-level overview. Now let's jump into the demo and see how everything works. Now, as usual, I like to keep things simple for you, so I have a GitHub repo, and all you need to do is go ahead and run or create a code space on the main branch. What will happen is going to generate a machine for you in the cloud, in GitHub's cloud, with all the necessary binaries installed so that you can go ahead and test really quickly. So we'll give this a minute or two to launch, and we'll come back and take a look at our demo. All right, so our code space is ready. Now for all of this to work, because I'm going to use Docker Compose, and from a networking perspective, you'll need to go to the bottom there. It says code space and open in VS Code desktop. And I'll explain why in just a second. Let this just run. The main reason for that is if you go over to, we haven't run it yet, but if you would go over to the port section, you'll find that if you're running in the cloud, you're going to run those ports under a specific host name. That's the GitHub basically URL that the code space is running in. But once you run this in a code space in a Visual Studio Code on your desktop, then when we run Docker Compose, all those ports are going to be local to your machine. So we run everything under localhost, and that should run fine. So we've got it running here in Visual Studio Code. Let's make this a little bit bigger so you can see better. And if you go to the README, it kind of shows you what you need to do. So first thing is we just need to start up the script here. And this is a startup script that will do a few things. Let's take a look at it. It's basically going to configure Vault, get things ready for Vault. So we're going to run Vault directly on the VM here. So we're going to initialize and unseal Vault. We'll create a directory for the Vault logs. We're going to run the Vault server, and as you can see, the Vault server is running with a particular configuration, which is defined here under the server HCL in Vault, which is under the config here. So this is the Vault configuration. All right, so nothing really fancy. The only thing you want to look at is the telemetry block here, and we're just saying Prometheus retention time is 12 hours. Disabling host name is true. But other than that, if you're using Raft or using any other storage mechanism, this will work fine. Okay, now let's go back to our script. As you can see, everything is already done. But let's quickly just show you the script here. And here we can see that we're creating, we're exporting our Vault address and exporting this particular folder where we're going to be running quite a few things. So we're making a directory here, Vault Monitoring Vault, and then we're initializing Vault with one key and one threshold, and unsealing Vault, and we're using the we're going to store these unsealed keys in we already stored it actually here. We're retrieving it in this command to unseal Vault, and then we're grabbing the root token here to log into Vault. And from here, we're going to create a policy for Prometheus to be able to get Prometheus to access Vault. Capability is read. And then we're going to create a token for Prometheus, again, making it simple for us to get Prometheus to talk to Vault. And then we're going to enable the audit logs at this particular file, vault-audit.log. And I didn't mention here that if you notice when we started Vault, we're pushing the Vault logs to this particular file. Okay, so if you go to Vault under logs, you have two files. The Vault log is the actual regular logs that you're used to when you run Vault. So these we call the operational or system logs. And then the Vault audit is the audit logs themselves that we have here that we just enabled. So both of these are going to go to Loki. Okay. So back to our script. After we've run all these things and we've enabled the audit logs, now we're running Docker Compose up, and from here we're actually running this Docker Compose file, and this Docker Compose file is building our stack. And I'll cover this in just a little bit, but let's see what we've got so far. If we go to the port section, you can see all the different ports that are running, and you can see here the local address is the local host. That's what I meant. If you were to run this in the actual code space in the browser, you're going to get a long link here. And the problem is that these different services are not going to be able to talk to each other because they don't know that particular link. But now everything works well because everybody's talking to each other on localhost. And that's why I mentioned that we should use Visual Studio Code to run this demo. All right, so then let's go ahead and run these commands to get our terminal ready for working with Vault. So export the Vault address, and then we're going to export this particular folder. And finally, let's log in with our Vault token. So Vault token lookup. It should be root. That's right, we are root. Perfect. So for the sake of this demo, we're going to run as root. Don't do this in production. This is just for us to run a demo. So now let's take a look at the first dashboard here, or our first UI, which is Grafana. And Grafana runs on port 3000. So if you go here and you just click this globe icon, it should take us to Grafana. Let me make this a bit bigger. The username is admin, and foobar is the password that is defined in a configuration file that I'll show you later. So we're in, and what I want to do is import a dashboard, and this dashboard was provided from Grafana Labs. So let's grab it, specific to Vault. It has pretty useful panels, so that's good to use. And if you go to the Grafana folder and go under provisioning, dashboards, go to the Vault JSON, copy, select everything, copy everything, paste it here as JSON, click load. It's going to load everything. It's going to ask you for the Prometheus source. Just select Prometheus, click import, and give it a few seconds, and you'll see that our dashboard is up and running. You can see that our Vault cluster is active. It's unsealed. We don't have any secrets yet. Number of leases 1. So very basic metrics that we see here. And if we take a look at the last 5 minutes, since we haven't run it before that, will give us a better view. And all these are metrics basically. This is all using the Prometheus data source as our metric. Or as our data source. So we want Loki to become our second data source here, right? So what we can do is go back to our README, and before I run some of these commands to test, why don't we add a couple more panels to our dashboard here. So what we can do is we can add a row, and let's add another row, and let's rename this one as Vault Logs update, and let's add a panel, and in this panel let's call it Vault System Logs. And now the data source is going to be Loki. And down here under labels, let's choose, let's go down a little bit and choose job. And we've got 2 jobs, audit logs and system logs. So let's choose system logs. Let's run queries. And let's flip this to logs. Okay, and let's go back a little bit. There we go. Let's save that. Save this to our dashboard, apply it. So now we have our system logs. Now let's add another panel, and this one we'll call Vault Audit Logs. And our source once again is Loki, and our job is audit logs. Run these queries, and let's select logs. There we go. Save that, apply that. All right. And let's do this. Let's add this one down here, and this one maybe down here. We can bring this entire panel or entire row to the bottom. Maybe we don't want to have the logs at the very top. Again, it's up to you to make these changes, but I'd like to see the logs at the bottom. You can make this a bit bigger. Audit logs, make them a little bit bigger. And what we can do is actually, let's see if we can duplicate this, or if I duplicate it and then I go and edit it, I'd like to filter on errors. Okay, so let's run this query. There's no errors. Okay, so let's save it right now and apply. Actually, let's rename this so we know that this is Vault Audit Error Logs. Apply. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and run some queries here to Vault to get some metrics to show up a little bit more. So if we go here, we've got we can enable the KV secrets engine. So let's do that. Close this and this. Okay, that's been enabled. Let's write a few secrets. Let's write 50 secrets, that is. And then we'll create some tokens as well. And then finally, we're going to attempt to log in multiple times with a non-existing username here. So we'll use the method userPass to try to log in. I'll show you how that is going to show errors in the audit log. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's go back over here. Let's give it a nice refresh. And you can see the number of leases here has gone up very quickly. And let's see what else is there. Let's add our KV mount point. Nothing has shown except this little piece here. Time of operations for KV, as you can see here. So that will take its time to populate on Grafana. Let's see what else is available. Token creation, you can see that. Tokens creation by method. Because I'm using the root token, so the method really is not showing anything other than inf here, so that's the root token. Token lookups, log requests, and so on. Policy get, and now the system logs. You can see the last log shows up at the top here, where we successfully mounted the path KV when we enabled the KV secrets engine. And then our Vault audit logs, you can see all the red here. These are all errors. So if I scroll down a little bit more, you can see that these are all the errors that are showing here. And I actually can do a little bit better if I go here and change this to show our prettified JSON. And let's save the dashboard. It gives you a nicer view of JSON here, and you can see it's highlighting errors, permission denied, and that's when we were trying to access Vault with a user name that does not exist, right? So we're seeing all these audit errors. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show you. There are of course a lot of things that you can do here with adding new panels and so on, and you can go down a big rat hole just trying to see what you need. So I will reference this document here, which is this one here, Telemetry Metrics Reference. This is a really decent document telling you or showing you the most important metrics that you should include in your dashboards. And of course they don't specify what you're going to use, because there are so many monitoring tools out there. So they at least give you the actual metric name. So Vault runtime, GC pause, NS, and garbage collection metrics, basically in a brief description. And you can grab these metrics you can grab these metrics directly from Grafana and be able to see it. So I mean, you can do a number of things. You can go into the Explore tab here and then start to look for any Vault related metrics. If you type Vault, and which one was this one? This was Vault. Let's just grab the garbage collection here. Vault runtime GC, so Vault runtime GC, and it was one of these. I don't remember which one, but you know, you grab one of these and you run a query, and then you can see some points here, and you go from there. Now there's also the node exporter. Remember we talked about the node exporter. So if you type node underscore, you're gonna get all kinds of metrics from the node itself. So CPU seconds, for example. Let's take a look at this one, and so on, right? So you're gonna get all kinds of metrics from the node itself, node memory maybe, or maybe or disk, right? So lots of metrics that you can use and go crazy with your dashboard and go from there. So that's pretty much it from a demo perspective. Let's go back and take a look at how all this magic happened in the configuration behind the scenes. So let's make this smaller, close all these. Now really quickly here, we've got a number of folders. I've got Alert Manager. We didn't really have time to go through this. Again, if you go and see the Vault 202 course, I'll cover alerts as well. Grafana is where you have the data sources defined here. So you can define the Loki data source defined here. And notice that since we're using Docker Compose allows you to use the name of the service directly. So it has its internal service discovery and DNS method. So here, if you just define the service as Loki, you can reference it later here as just Loki and then the port number. So that's the first data source. Second data source is Prometheus. Once again, I'm using the Prometheus service name with the port 9090. So this is really defining the data sources that Grafana expects. And as I said before, here is the Vault dashboard. I at first had this as a provisioned dashboard, meaning that when you spin up Grafana, it will automatically have these dashboards. But then I found that I ran into issues with the data source, and I found that it's much better to just import those dashboards because those dashboards are in the form of a template. So you see here it has a bunch of inputs, and this input here, this data source Prometheus, gets referenced in many places in the JSON file with the different panels and so on. So when you import it, Grafana automatically applies the data source ID, so you don't have to worry about anything. Whereas if you run it as a, here, if you uncomment this and use it to be provisioned while you run Grafana, you're going to run into issues. The next folder is Loki. Loki has a configuration file as well. Take a quick look here and see what that looks like. And then Prometheus, if you look at the Prometheus YAML file and scroll down, this is really the most important section, the jobs that we're specifying for Prometheus itself here, and then C advisor. We didn't talk about this one. This is the container advisor, but we're scraping metrics off the containers as well. If you're interested in taking a look at those containers. Then we also have here the Vault job, and this one is exposing the metric path v1 sys metrics. That's where Prometheus is going to scrape metrics from. And the format is Prometheus, the scheme is HTTP. Authorization, this is important. The credentials file is stored right here, and this is basically the token that we created in the very beginning. So that's the token that Prometheus is going to use to access Vault. And then static configs, I'm using this host.docker.internal hostname, and this allows Prometheus to access Vault, because Prometheus is running inside of a container, whereas Vault is running directly on the VM. So this is a way to be able to access the host machine from within the container. And then finally the job node exporter, and this allows me to talk to node exporter, once again using the service name and the port, and this is how Prometheus is able to extract or scrape the metrics from the node itself. Next on our list here is Promtail. If you remember, Promtail is the agent that runs inside of the VM, or in this case it runs inside of a container, and it allows the push mechanism. So it collects the logs. We have two types of logs, the audit logs and the system operational logs, and each one is stored in a particular file. So you can see the path here is the Vault audit log, and this one is the Vault log, and this is actually the path inside of the Promtail container. If you notice, var log vault, and we're exposing this through a volume in Docker Compose, which ties into the location on the host machine, which is inside here, Vault logs, Vault audit. You'll see this in the Docker Compose file when we get there. So that's pretty much it from a Promtail perspective. Next on our list is Vault. We saw the configuration file. The data itself is stored in this data folder. Don't need to worry about this. I'm not even pushing it into Git. And then the logs, as I mentioned here, the Vault audit logs that are being written, and the Vault logs themselves. These are the operation logs. Vault init, this is just for me to store the unsealed key in the root token. Don't do this in production. This is just a fast way of running our demo. And then the Docker Compose file is the last piece that I want to cover. As you can see here, we have a number of services. The first one is Prometheus. And with Prometheus, we have our image and the volume. We're tying the folder Prometheus, which is over here, and pushing that to etc Prometheus inside of the container. The data for Prometheus itself, we don't really care too much. This is being stored as a volume, as a Docker volume. Some of the commands that we're running here, as you can see, the config file is the prometheus.yaml file that we saw, which is here, pushed into the container, and a few other commands as well. We're exposing port 9090 for Prometheus, and this is necessary. I mentioned before the host Docker internal. When you're running Docker Compose, you need to add this extra hosts to allow the container to talk to the host. Okay, depends on CD advisor. Node exporter, as you can see also, here's the next image or service. Volumes, commands, nothing much to talk about here. We're exposing port 9100. Alert manager is also run. We didn't cover that. cAdvisor is also there if you want to take a look at some of the metrics from the containers themselves that are running here. And then Grafana, as you can see, is being used as well. And the couple of volumes that we have here, Grafana data, we're storing the data, and then Grafana provisioning is getting pushed to etc Grafana provisioning, once again, which is this folder on the node itself. We have an environment file as well, which is Grafana config monitoring, which is right here, this one. And this is where we define the username and the password that we were able to log into Grafana with. Of course, don't define this as I did here, because now it's going to get pushed into your Git repo and be exposed. So you don't want to do it that way. Then Loki is the next service, and it's on port 3100. And once again, we're grabbing the configuration from the folder right here, Loki config, Loki config. And the port's 3100. And we're running it with the config file, local config. And finally, Promtail is also running with extra hosts, because once again it needs to talk from the container out to the host to be able to push the logs or from Vault, or to be able to talk to Vault and then push the logs over to Loki. The volumes that we're mounting here, we got the config YAML in Promtail right here. That's pushed into etc Promtail on inside the container. And we're also looking at the workspace vault monitoring, vault logs. And again, this is very important because this is where we're pushing these logs that are defined in vault logs inside of Promtail. And from there is where the Promtail config, as you can see here, it's talking to this path. And that's what it's looking for those particular job names that we're able to see inside of Grafana. And that is pretty much it. That's all the configuration to show you how to properly monitor Vault. You probably will have your own setup for monitoring if you're running this in production, but at least this gives you an overview of what to look for. Remember, when we talk about monitoring logs, three things that come to mind: telemetry or metrics that we did with were scraped with Prometheus. The second piece is the system logs for Vault, and then finally the audit logs that Vault emits, and those again were used, or the data source in this case was Loki, everything pushed into Grafana. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the description or in the comments of this video, and give us a thumbs up, and also subscribe to my channel, and let me know what other videos you're interested in seeing. And if again I kind of whet your appetite a little bit and want to use or see more of operational kind of videos in terms of Vault, then go ahead and take a look at the course Vault 202, Vault for Operators. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in another video.